Hello again, Chris Lee and Alfred Ezman of Southeastern 14 here to do some super regional previews. Right now we're doing Tennessee and Evansville. Right, everybody had that matchup circled a week ago. The Purple Aces coming to Knoxville, having gotten out of Greenville and slipped by VCU, Wake Forest, which it didn't have to play, and then beating ECU 2 out of 3 times on ECU's field. That's a lot to get through to get to a super regional, but boy, they got something waiting for them in the Vols, who won the SEC, tied with Kentucky, but won the tiebreaker, won the SEC tournament, and then went 3-0 in the regional. Alfred, this will be the ultimate David versus Goliath super regional. It's the only one matching a 1 and a 4.
Yeah, it's the Cinderella team of the tournament. I guess the designated Cinderella team going up against, the team that's the #1 national seed. And I couldn't have asked for a better comparison between the two. It is David and Goliath, and who knows? I mean, maybe Evansville can shock the world and get a win here and make it tough for Tennessee, but we'll have to see. It's a very interesting matchup that no one had, so I can't wait to get into it.
Yeah, could be Goliath and Goliath light, just based on how these teams hit home runs. We'll get in. That's our spoiler alert. We'll get into that in a minute. But first of all, our reminder, this content brought to you by BetOnline, your #1 source for NBA Finals and Stanley Cup playoffs this season. Every stat, matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the game is over, head on to our online casino, get in on a game of blackjack or poker, unwind with one over 150 slot games. Head to the website today, get in on the action. Use promo code BELIEVE, that is BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, the game starts here. All right, let's start with the Vols. We start with the SEC teams and all these because we obviously are an SEC channel. You kind of run out of things to say after a while, but everybody knows the story. It's the home runs. Christian Moore's got 29. Blake Burke's got 17. Kavares Tears 18. Dylan Dreiling 19. Billy Amick 21. Dean Curley 11. Those are your double-figure home run hitters for the Vols. Hunter Inslee, 1 away from joining them. I think every one of those guys hit a home run in the regional, if I remember, which Tennessee won with flying colors. Let's talk about that offense because this is a challenging team to pitch to. I think you'll see Moore and Burke as major leaguers one day, maybe Tears too. I don't know where he sits in mock drafts or those kind of things, but certainly Burke and Moore are guys I expect to be major leaguers. We've talked about they've got guys on the bench. And this is the team that discovered certainly the bats in the Knoxville Regional. I say discovered, like they just were unfound and came alive at the last minute. Obviously, if you followed college baseball, you know about Tennessee's home run hitting and run scoring capacity. The Vols led the country in home runs. It's just a team that you don't want to pitch to, basically 1-9.
Yeah, you kind of do run out of things to say at this point with them and how they can hit the ball. And, there was a quote on the SEC's website that was used as a recap for the final Southern Miss game of that regional. And it said Tennessee overwhelmed Southern Miss. And they overwhelmed every team they played in the regional this past weekend. And it was just because once one person hit home runs, the next person did. And then the person after that hit a home run. And then the guy after that hit a home run. And there was just nothing these, bullpens could do against this team. And part of that is them going to Lindsey Nelson. And that's what Evansville is going to have to do here is earn it in Tennessee's ballpark. And the biggest thing is I think we'll talk about it a little more, but the deeper Evansville goes into its bullpen, I think the more trouble it's going to find itself in just because Tennessee is going to start pouncing. Tennessee was really good this weekend too with drawing walks. They were making pitchers pitch to them in the zone in order to get that long ball going. And with those walks comes extra runs on the bases for when home runs are hit. So it turns into 2-3-run homers, grand slams, even as Billy Amick had one against Indiana in that game. So it's a different team. I mean, they're one of the biggest home run hitting teams ever in all of college baseball. This team this year, which is phenomenal considering they did the same thing 2 years ago. But here we are. It's the name of their game, and you're going to have to bring your A game when you're pitching against them.
Yeah, and part of Tennessee being able to separate from other teams has been the pitching. I mean, the offense is always what gets the attention, but Tennessee's starting pitching has not been as elite as some of Frank Anderson's pitching staffs that we've seen, but it's pretty good. you've got AJ Causey isn't really a starter, but might as well be. They'll do the Chris Stamos thing for 1 to 2 innings, and then they'll hand it off to Causey, who had an under 4 ERA, just under 4 this year, struck out 109 hitters, walked just 17 and 81 in the third innings, and feels like he hit a little bit of a rough patch maybe mid-season, but it feels like it's been a while since AJ Causey had a bad outing. So that's your game 1 plan if you're Tennessee. Game 2 has been Drew Beam, who's been a steady performer. Steady's underselling. He's been very good for 4 years. He's not going to be a guy that you look up at the end of the night, the box score says he went 8 and struck out 15, but he is a guy that consistently gets into the middle innings. I mean, I think a typical Drew Beam outing is he probably goes 6 and gives up a couple earned runs, and that's more than good enough with that offense. That's number 2. If needed, they get to Xander Sechrist, the lefty, in game 3, who's a little of a softer tosser, I guess, but again, made it work. ERA of 3.60 this year, pitched 60 innings, struck out 60 guys. But where they separate is those guys, you rarely see Tennessee have a, 1 inning, 7 earned run kind of start. And then when they go to the bullpen, it's kind of the same thing. You may see a guy have a mini blow up here and there, but the hook with these guys isn't very long. And the 2 guys to watch for, Aaron Combs, who inning per inning was the most dominant guy they had, struck out 51 and 36 in third innings, was their better, shorter reliever. And then the guy that I really liked on that staff, Nate Snead, who brings it at 100. Not a huge strikeout guy, but had an ERA of 2.05 in 65 innings. You know me, I love my guys that can give you jumbo relief outings, carry you 3, 4, 5, 6 innings. And they've got other guys, but they cover so many innings with that plan that they're just tough to beat.
Yeah, they are. And another guy I'll talk about, Chris, just to add on to names within this pitching staff, Kirby Cannell. He's been in that program for years upon years now. And he's become, I think during Hoover, he's kind of found his identity as a sometimes closure, but more often than not, a setup man in the 8th inning for them, in the innings right before the 9th inning. And it's worked out really well. I mean, he's, he knows what this is about. He's played, I don't know how many NCAA tournament games at this point, being with them since I believe 2019. He's been there that long. And I mean, it's just, they're deep, and the pitching, was kind of on and off for them with guys like Causey, and not necessarily vintage Drew Beam like we've seen years prior, but that they're starting to turn it up. And that started at Hoover when they made their tournament title run, and it's continued through this regional. I mean, a lot of guys, they didn't really, it felt like they didn't really exploit a ton of pitching during this past regional because they didn't need to. Part of it was the offense, but they gave up very few runs in each of these games. In fact, I don't think they gave up more than, actually, that's not true. So they gave up 6 to Indiana, but the other games that they played, they gave up 3 runs to Southern Miss and Northern Kentucky. So they were very good. They didn't exploit a lot of the pitching. It wasn't like they were, spread going rampant through their bullpen like Florida was necessarily, but they're good enough to kind of set up this offense almost and get them into the position of winning these games with a lot of runs, because once that offense gets going and gets all these runs, all you need is a few shutdown innings, which each of these guys are able to do. And, that, again, once again, that's the way to their winning ways, and it should be in the super against Evansville.
Yeah, they're complementary in the sense that the offense knows that the pitching, they're not going to have to score 12 runs every game, and the pitching staff knows that the offense is pretty much always going to be there, and that's one of the many things that makes the Vols tough. Let's talk about Purple Aces. And this is a team that the last I checked, I haven't seen the updated graphic, but they flashed the graphic at the end of that last ECU win that they had regional home runs. And Tennessee, I think, had 12. And Evansville was, I think, next, maybe tied next with 10. They played 4 games, hit 10 home runs. That's 2.5 a game. The pitching they see will be tougher than what they faced. But this is a team that hit some bombs this year. 92 as a team. You've got Kip Fougerrouse. Hit 21 of them. Mark Shallenberger hit 17. Brent Widder hit a dozen. This is going to be a lineup that if you're going to beat Tennessee, you're going to have to play long ball with them. And I'm not saying Evansville can go blow for blow, but we've seen some crazy things happen in a few regionals. And if you want a recipe for crazy, it's having Evansville match Tennessee bomb for bomb.
Yeah, and looking at Evansville this past regional in Greenville again with the ECU team, they kind of cruised through it. I mean, looking at, obviously they had dropped one in that 19-run outing, but you take that one away. I mean, they were able to get the big wins they needed. They put up 17 on VCU, albeit VCU is not the Tennessee Volunteers when it comes to baseball by any means, but they put up 17 runs on that team. The pitching was solid enough in the other 2 East Carolina games to get it done. And that's the biggest thing with them, I think, and the biggest challenge going forward, obviously, is just going to be, you need your hitting to match Tennessee's, because Tennessee is going to hit home runs, at least 1 per game. And that's for Evansville. And if Tennessee moves forward and gets beyond this series, that's going to be the case for them every single game they play the rest of the season. But with Evansville, that's the biggest challenge. And the pitching too, Chris, I'll let you get into it a little bit as well. But for the Purple Aces, it's a little interesting because this isn't necessarily a double elimination regional where you need a ton of arms ready to go. It's, 3 games max. And they have 2 starters who not necessarily are mind-blowing with the stats they put up, but the ERAs are solid with sub-4. I'm talking about Kenton, Deverman, and then Shane Harris, who Deverman's made a lot of starts. Harris has made a little bit less, granted, but I mean, looking at them, 3.81 for Deverman, Harris with 3.63. The strikeout numbers for Deverman really good, up at 81, and then 68 obviously for Harris. He's actually a little more efficient than Deverman is with the strikeout ball. And then Deverman's has a 9-1 record, and obviously those 2 are going to need to bring their A games. But I would imagine with looking at the options they have, those 2 will be the game 1 and 2 starters against Tennessee. So if those guys bring it and are able to halt Tennessee just enough, maybe that lineup can hit enough home runs to keep them well within the game and in a winning position.
Yeah, it's a difficult needle to thread, but I'll give you the recipe if they do it. It starts with Harris, and I saw him, I think he threw like 81 pitches, something like that, in one of those Sunday games. They brought him back Monday afternoon. He comes on to close the ninth in that clinching game, and he got East Carolina in order, and he just threw 2 breaking balls. He's got a curve and a slider, I guess, and he didn't show a fastball. And he really commanded him and located him. And I think he had hitters just sitting there going, all right, I'm waiting for the fastball, sitting on it. Next thing you know, you're down 0-2, and then you can throw one a little bit out of the zone, and you got guys chasing and stuff. So he was throwing breaking balls and getting ahead in the count in the short sample that I saw him. And again, when your season is on the line, I thought it was interesting they trusted Shane Harris, who had thrown a bunch of pitches the day before. Deverman, the other guy that you mentioned, 81 strikeouts, 106 in the 3rd innings. From that, just not a lot left. I mean, Donovan Schultz was a guy that gave him a lot of innings, 16 starts, 89 in the 3rd, but an ERA near 6. Their bullpen kind of the numbers aren't real pretty. They had a lot of guys that threw volume innings. I'm presuming some of these guys, Evansville probably gotten some slugfests, and hey, if you can give us 5 and give up 5, that may be a win the way they can hit. But I guess that's a lot of words to say. Harris and Deverman are their guys, and outside that, I'm not sure that I see a real path to pitching success based on their history.
Yeah, and look, I'm with you on their bullpen. I'm looking down the list here. The only guy, I guess I'll name 2 just for the sake of more stuff to talk about, but the one guy that stands out is Ethan Bell with a 3.68 ERA, but you go over, he's pitched, 14 2/3 all season. Same thing with the other guy I was going to mention, Elias Hackham. I'm sorry if I butchered that, or Hatcham or something like that. 4.91 ERA, but he's pitched 3 2/3 all season. So those guys, I don't know if you're throwing those guys out there against this Tennessee lineup when they haven't pitched all season. Albeit we saw Southern Miss throw Josh Ock, who was a freshman out there, but it was bombs away from Cal Stark when that happened. So they're in a touchy spot. That's why I mentioned earlier, if they get into their bullpen, I think they put themselves in a bad spot against Tennessee. So that's really going to have to be the story of it. If you're going to want to beat them, if you're Evansville, you need 7 inning starts. You need those guys to go that deep into this game, because you can't have any opens whatsoever, any openers. You can't really even have 4 or 5 inning starts like you would see from a lot of guys now in college baseball. You need deep starts to kind of shut down this lineup as much as you can. And if you don't, you're going to find yourself in a sticky spot because the Vols will go crazy. I mean, in their own ballpark, if that's the case.
Yeah, I just, teams get on runs and crazy things happen. Evansville is 15-15 on the road. I think the most valuable part of that is it played 30 games outside of its own park. And oh, by the way, 4 more on neutral. That's 34 games. So this is a team that's used to playing away. But I mean, I good luck beating Tennessee on the moon right now. No disrespect to Evansville, but your path there is to maybe try to get this over in 2 with those guys throwing something near complete games. And that just, we've seen crazy stuff happen in baseball. We saw SEMO handle Arkansas last week as a 4. But this doesn't feel like that kind of scenario. I'm taking the Vols, and I think I'd kind of be surprised if Evansville got a game here.
I am too. I'm going to do Tennessee in 2. I just don't think that pitching for the Purple Aces can go deep enough against Tennessee. And I just think, we're going to see similar stuff from Tennessee as we did in their regional. I mean, they're going to hit the ball. They're going to have, I think they're averaging around 2.5 homers a game. They're going to do that, I think, in each game they win in this super regional. And yeah, I think they're going to get it done. And Tennessee's going to go to Omaha for, I believe, the 3rd time in 4 seasons.
Yeah, now here's an interesting. Harris gave up 3 home runs all year. So he's got a knack for keeping the ball on the ground. Now for Deverman, it's a different story. He gave up 12. But again, if you're looking for, let's say, this time next week, something crazy's happened. And that's the value in this kind of preview. Anybody can sit here and tell you Tennessee will win, and here's why. If you want a reason why, if something crazy happens, it was Evansville. I think that would have been a path, but again, I wouldn't predict it with any level of confidence. And again, I think that Evansville getting 1 in that series would feel like an accomplishment, but of course that doesn't get you in Omaha. So thank you for watching. We're going to preview all the 5 super regionals involving SEC teams. Best way to get that, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. For Alfred, Ezman, I'm Chris Lee. You're watching us at Southeastern 14, presented by Bet Online.